and only DNVR. Two girls that to Zac Mase arcade at the bar. Three for Mr. B in that old trophy case. None supposed to wait for, well, bring on the chase. Out on the field at Mile High, Broncos win is our side. Coupled with Breck, Brew, and a friend bleed orange and blue to the bitter end. Come and join us, DNVR. We are DNVR.
We are DNVR, and we are here to lift your spirits in Broncos Country. Nuggets, it's been a little tough 24 hours. But we are here to tell you about the great Denver Broncos and talk about the draft, because they don't have a first or an early second round pick because they've got Russell Wilson. I think that's a trade-off all of us will take. So that can brighten your Tuesday morning after a Nuggets loss last night. And I'm your host, Zac Stevens, joined by my man, Andrew Mason. And before we hop into the show, got to tell you about our presenting sponsor, MSU Denver Online, because time and time again, the one thing that will protect you against economic downturn is an education allowing you to adapt into varying careers. And you can go build your toolbox over at MSU Denver Online, whether you want to take one class or whether you want to go get a degree. You can do that over at MSU Denver Online, and they have mastered the art of online learning because they've been doing online learning for years, way before the pandemic started. So check them out over at MSU Denver Online. My boy, Mase, how is it going?
All right. How are you doing, Zac?
I'm doing good. You know, I'm trying to forget about last night. It was a really tough Nuggets game. The Warriors look incredible, and fouls don't like to be called on Jokic, and it's just something I want to forget about.
Yeah, the officiating left something to be desired, but I don't think that it would have necessarily turned 2 losses into 2 wins. This looks like a Nuggets team that you had bench guys that were asked to start for long periods. You have Jokic putting the team on his back for the entire year. It looks like a Nuggets team that is out of gas against a Warriors team that is healthy and starting to peak at the right time and looks like a championship level team. It just feels like a perfect storm.
Yeah, it does. And unfortunately, like you said, it pains me to say, because I've hated the Warriors for a decade now, but they look like a championship caliber team. But enough about them. I don't want to talk about the Warriors because I hate them. I want to talk about something that I like talking about, and that's the draft, and that's the Denver Broncos, and that's the Denver Broncos in the draft. And Mase, I want to talk about the positions of need that the Broncos have entering the draft, kind of rank those positions of need, and then talk about, do the Broncos have to draft a specific position on day 2? Because, of course, on day 2, they have 3 picks, 1 at the end of the second round and then 2 in the third round. Who knows? George may move around to pick up 4 picks on day 2 of the draft. And I want to break down just where the Broncos' positions of need are, because I don't think it's clear cut. It's if the Broncos hadn't traded for Russell Wilson, quarterback would be position number 1. That would by far be the biggest position the Broncos had going into the draft. But they don't have that. They don't have to worry about that. Quarterback is not up there. So what I want to do to start off is let's go position by position and break down whether the Broncos have a high, medium, low, or no need at each position. And let's kind of get the conversation started that way. And so, Mase, let's just start with quarterback. What's the level of need for the Broncos at quarterback entering the draft?
It's about, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's about a 1.
Low, would we say, or no need?
It's low because because it should never be 0. I don't care what you have at starter, because you always have the option of a guy who falls in day 3, taking him with a 6th or 7th round pick, seeing where he goes, and then if the lottery tick does pay off, then offloading that player for a much higher pick down the line while bolstering your backup position in the interim. Because of that, and because you may need your backup at some point, I'll never say quarterback is a 0. I'll say it's a 1.
And excuse me, the reason why I agree with you, why it's low instead of none, is obviously there's no need for a starter, and there's not a need for a starter for the next decade for the Broncos. But you look at the backups, Mace, they're paying Josh Johnson, who they signed in free agency, $1 million. If your backup quarterback is not getting at least $5 million, then you have a need there because you are not committed to him. Also, Josh Johnson only on a 1-year deal. And we know Brett Rippon, he's making the minimum as well. And he's on a year-to-year deal as well. So for me, it is a low need, but there is still somewhat of a need there, but obviously not a pressing one. Okay, let's go to running back, Mason. An interesting one. Broncos have a stud starter in Javonte Williams. And then is Mike Boone a comfortable backup? Do they need a bigger upgrade at backup? And how big is that need there?
I'm not comfortable with Mike Boone as the only option. This is an 8 for me.
An 8. Whoo, so are we going high or medium there?
That's high.
Oh, man, I love it. And I would go for running back. I would go a medium level of need, but it's certainly one that needs to be addressed. I mean, there was a reason why we talked about Melvin Gordon so often and why the Broncos said they want him back is because they have a big hole at that second running back. Look, I really like what Mike Boone can do in terms of being a guy that can come out of the backfield and provide a receiving element, can provide a speed, a change of pace back, but he didn't play last year. And the coaching staff seemed competent at times, did not believe in him. And I think if they would have believed in him fully this year, they would have just said, no, Mike Boone's our number 2. We love him. Maybe we'll get a guy on day 3. But I do think that there is a need here at running back. So I agree with you. That's medium high sort of level there. Okay, and now let's go outside to wide receiver. What's the need there?
That's a 1.
So why low instead of none?
I'm probably never going to give a none.
Okay, fair.
Yeah.
Unless you are, I don't even know. Unless you're the 2015 Broncos defense or something, you don't need anything on defense.
Well, even then, you'd always like depth. You could have a great position group, and you could always get deeper, right? So it's not like you don't want to hit on picks. I mean, and you never know what position is going to get the injury bug. Every year, even in a good injury year, there's a position that has a cluster of injuries, and you don't know where that's going to be. So it's hard to look at any position and say, okay, it's an absolute 0 in terms of need, at least from my take on it.
Oh, yeah, and that's totally fair. And for me, I would have probably gone, no, there's no level of need here. But here's where I'll agree with you on the one, Mace, is KJ Hamler. We've already talked about he's a guy that we personally are not counting on this year because we just don't want to. We don't want the rug pulled from us again. And after 2 years of injuries, we don't want to count on him. And if you don't have KJ Hamler, well, then you don't have a deep threat. Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, they're all great, but they are not 4-2 type of guys, 4-3 type of guys. So I'll say that's where the need would be for this Broncos wide receiving core is getting a deep threat guy because I actually like the depth that they have. I really like Kendall Hinton, and from some things I've heard from Russell Wilson's camp, they really like Kendall Hinton as a wide receiver, not just a backup quarterback and a story that he is. They really like him, so I like the depth there, but if you don't have KJ Hamler, you need that deep threat, especially with Russell Wilson. Now, look, when it was Teddy Bridgewater, you didn't really need that deep threat, but with Russ, you do.
Well, the other thing is also, and it translates to special teams. Right now, you are looking at returner. At this point, Kendall Hinton's probably your returner. But if there was a speed guy who was available on day 3, who is more of a returner, again, like a Deontay Spencer, I think you'd have to take a look at that to potentially upgrade your special teams.
Right, exactly. So we'll go 1 there. Now let's move inside to tight end. I'm curious where you fall here, Mace.
I think this is probably about a 9 in terms. This is look. What you have right now, your top 2 guys, you have one guy who is in line and strictly a blocker in Eric Tomlinson, and you have another guy who's a move in Albert Okwuegbunam, but he is an ineffective blocker. You don't have anybody who can swing and do both. I mean, and ideally you want a tight end who has enough balance to where you're not tipping your hand pre-snap based on who you've got playing the position. And right now, that's something that does not exist on this roster. So
Yeah.
if again, if Trey McBride is there at 64, he makes a lot of sense, not only in terms of the value of the pick, but also somebody who might well step in and play a lot because he gives you something that you do not currently possess on the roster. You can get by with what you have, but it's not ideal.
And it's funny because when you look at the Broncos tight end room, you say, okay, they've got a really good blocker and they've got a really good receiver. And then you realize that those are two different players.
Yeah.
And you say, well, they don't have that overall guy. And in fact, they don't really have a starter because Tomlinson is not a guy that you want out there starting all 17 games. He's a great guy to bring in certain situations. I really think he was a good signing, great value, a guy that can do one thing and one thing really well. And right now, you can say the exact opposite about Alberto. He can do one thing and he can do one thing really well, and that is as a receiver. In fact, Nathaniel Hackett just a month ago at the owners meeting said that Alberto is more of pretty much a wide receiver right now. So he's saying he's not even the full tight end. So I agree with you that this is a need for the Broncos here.
Mhm.
And they could, in fact, even though we all like Alberto and the threat he could be, they could draft a starter at tight end from day one just because of how imbalanced these two guys are. So I agree with you. There certainly is a need at the tight end position. And then let's just look at offensive line as a general group right now. What's the need there?
It's probably about 7.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, you don't now, unlike at tight end, and this is why tight end is higher. You're not looking and saying, wow, this group is missing something right now. You've got enough in terms of starters, and even if you start factoring in depth based on what you've brought in, you brought in a Tom Compton who can swing between the inside and the outside. You have Calvin Anderson who's had some starting experience coming back. You've still got Netani Muti in the room. You've got a surplus of interior guys who can play at this point. So it's a lower need because it's a lower need for the moment, but it's a need long term. And the whole thing of having to develop another right tackle, that's still out there right now. So I think probably more third round than second round when we talk about if this could be day 2, but it's not low on the list.
No, it's not. And like you said, it is low for a day one starter this year. But when you look at the future, the Broncos don't have a right tackle next year. The 3 guys that are competing for that position, Mase, this year, and Tom Compton and Calvin Anderson and Billy Turner, they're all on 1-year deals. They could all be gone next season. So the Broncos have to finally address offensive line in the draft. They haven't drafted a tackle since Garrett Bowles with their first round pick in 2017, which is just crazy. So when I look at this offensive line, I do say that it is specifically right tackle that has that need, but it's not that day one need that you're talking about. Okay, so after going through the offensive side, Mase, of the 5 positions, we have 2 with a low need and 3 with a semi-high need, which is interesting. I'm curious where defense comes in, and let's start on the inside out. Let's go to defensive line. What's the level of need there?
It's a low key high need, probably about a 7.5 or an 8.
A low-key high need. I like that. And I think you're right there because the defensive line is something that we haven't talked about much this year. Broncos, I really like what they did by bringing DJ Jones in. At his position, they don't have a need. Draymond Jones, he's a really good player, but I'm curious what happens with him. Does he turn into a $15 million per year player after this season by playing so well? And those guys are maybe the guys when you're paying a quarterback and you're paying 2 wide receivers and you know you're paying Pat Surtain, you may have to let go of that sort of player like the Broncos did with Malik Jackson when he went and got $15 million. The Broncos just couldn't keep him. So you do want some depth there. And right now the Broncos don't have any depth, but outside of those 2 guys, Mase, the Broncos don't really have anyone proven. I love what McTelvin Najim brings to the table and what he was doing in training camp, but he barely saw the field last year. So I can't say that I love him and I love what he brings to the game and that the Broncos love him as well. So I think the Broncos have 2 studs on the defensive line and then just huge question marks.
Yeah, and right now, if you're going for a base look, if you have Deshaun Williams or McTelvin Agim starting, and Agim's kind of the wild card in there. Now, I think we're going to see more sub packages, and I think we're going to see a lot of two down lineman look, which would lend itself to DJ Jones and Draymond Jones primarily, and then you can kind of live with that. But this is something where you could use an upgrade. I'm just not sure value wise that there is something there this year in the draft based on where the Broncos pick.
Okay. So there is a need there, but unsure how it matches up with the draft. Let's
Yeah.
go outside. Outside linebacker. Man, this has got to be up there, right?
It's up there because right now you have two starters who have injury concerns, historically speaking. I mean, Randy Gregory, of course, has the substance abuse suspensions, but he's also had some injuries. He missed some time last year on injured reserve, and Bradley Chubb has, since the start of the 2019 season, missed almost as many games as he's actually played. Your backups right now are, you get to Jonathan Cooper and Malik Reed and Baron Browning getting a look at outside linebacker, and they're intriguing, but do you want Baron Browning to be there long term? Do you want him back bouncing to the inside? One thing that was mentioned down in Palm Beach by George Paton, Nathaniel Hackett, was kind of, all right, let's cross train him a bit so he can do everything. But right now, you don't really trust the depth, and so again, this is probably going to be something that comes in at about 7.5 or an 8.
7.5 or 8, and it's really fair. And again, the day one starter isn't there unless, and I'm touching wood right now, unless there's no guarantee that you're going to have Randy Gregory back. We've heard so many times where a guy is just injured in the offseason. He's going to be back by training camp. Then day one of training camp comes around and he's not back. And oh no, he'll be back for the preseason game comes around. He's not back. Oh, he'll be back by week. We've heard that so many times over the last few years. So I'm not even saying that they don't have a need day one, but it's something that they shouldn't have a need. But then you do have to factor in that you're going to need guys playing. So I think a 7.5 is fair for outside linebacker. Now, inside linebacker, Mase.
You have the option of moving Baron Browning back there, and based on what he did in coverage last year, I hope that if it doesn't look like it's working on the edge, that they move him back inside as quickly as possible. You have Alex Singleton has played extensively. You can debate just how well he's played, but he has a lot of high level experience coming in. Josie Jewell, we know what he can do. I mean, he was looking like a Pro Bowler the first week and a quarter before he got hurt, and has steadily gotten better over the course of his career. I don't think this is as high a need as a lot of people think. I think this is about a 6.
Okay, a 6. So now we're kind of getting into medium range,
Yeah.
and I'm okay with that, because especially when you take into positional value at inside linebacker, especially with Evero running a similar defense as Vic Fangio, that was a position that you could cover up, especially with the Broncos playing a lot of dime this year. That's a position that's just not going to be on the field. You're not going to have two guys on the field that often. So I do think that that's a position that isn't as pressing as some people think. Let's bounce outside to the cornerback position. Of course, you got Ronald Darby as a starter. You got Quan Williams as a starter in the slot. And you have Pat Surtain, the stud shutdown corner on the outside. In terms of starters, you don't need anything. But in terms of depth, Mace, I mean, it's Michael Ojemudia and then big questions. And it's not like Michael Ojemudia is a big answer right now.
I mean, how much do you trust Ojemudia? And he's a guy who missed nearly the entire 2021 season on injured reserve last year. So this, and plus, you start kind of making your long-term plans here. You need to have somebody waiting in the wings, perhaps ready to go if injury strikes in 2022, but perhaps ready to be one of those top 3 guys in 2023. This is about an 8.
An 8. Holy cow. That is way up there. I would probably go a 5 personally, just because you have the starters this year. But Ronald Darby, Mace, you could move on from him after this year and save about $10 million against the cap. So you could create a need for yourself there. But we'll go with an 8 there for that. And then safety, Mace. We know the Broncos brought back Kareem Jackson, have Justin Simmons, have good depth with Caden Stearns, and they also have Jamar Johnson and Reed back there.
Yeah, they signed J.R. Reed. He's mostly for special teams purposes, but he can provide depth. This is about a 3. You have PJ Locke there as well. You feel good about the depth. You feel good. You feel good about your starters right now. This is actually when they brought Kareem Jackson back. This went from a position that looked like one where you were going to have to target to one where it now looks like one of the deeper positions on the roster, which I'm not sure Mel Kiper Jr. got the memo, because when he and Todd McShay did a 2-round mock draft, I believe Mel had the Broncos taking a safety.
Yeah, and that's why it's good, and we appreciate you guys tuning in with us for the local Broncos coverage, because sometimes the national coverage gets a little confused about just what the Broncos need, because what I like about this, Mason, and when you talk about the draft, you got to talk about, especially in the early picks, you got to talk about the now, but you also have to talk about the future, and the Broncos they're set at safety for the now and for the future, so I like having the safety position as a low level of need entering the draft. Now let's break these down and compare them to one another, but first I got to tell you about our friends over at DraftKings Sportsbook, because it's basketball time. And despite the Nuggets breaking our hearts the past 2 games, you can still get $150 in free bets over at DraftKings Sportsbook by using the code DNVR over at DraftKings Sportsbook. Bet $5 on any basketball game, and that's all you have to do. Just bet $5 and you get $150 in your account instantly. It is as easy as that, and there's really no better time to sign up to get $150 in your account than right now for playoffs for the Nuggets. And then, of course, we got Avs playoffs coming up, and they should be looking at a long playoff push. Plus, each day of the first round, get a risk-free bet up to $10 if your same game parlay doesn't hit. DraftKings has so many deals day in and day out. So download the top-rated DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code DNVR when you sign up to get this offer of getting $150 free in your account by just betting $5 on any NBA game over at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Must be 21 or older, Colorado only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. And
maybe you're watching the Nuggets Warriors game last night. You're watching on TNT, and you're hearing such gems as Stan Van Gundy explaining that Nikola Jokic should draw more fouls, but he doesn't get the fouls drawn against him that Andrew Wiggins does, because Andrew Wiggins is faster. And you're like, okay, well, that's an interesting rationalization for it. If you don't want that sort of rationalization, you want something a little more locally oriented, then you want to watch the Nuggets on altitude. And that means you need Evoca TV if you don't have altitude right now. Evoca TV has altitude. They have AT&T Sportsnet Rocky Mountain. They have all, of course, the local over-the-air channels. So what that means is that you can watch every Denver sporting event with Evoca TV. It's a new paradigm for television delivery that's less expensive, more efficient, offers a superior picture to the legacy providers. They've got other national channels as well as the local channels, like I mentioned, and they're growing constantly and adding new channels to their lineup. Evoca is now available in Denver, Colorado Springs, Phoenix, Boise, and Twin Falls, Idaho. And like I said, it's got altitude and it's got AT&T Sportsnet Rocky Mountain. So you can watch the Rockies off to their hot start. You can watch the Avs. You can watch the Nuggets. You can watch the Raptors. You can watch the Mammoth, and much, much more. So how do you get Evoca TV? Well, go to evoca.tv/DNVR. That's EVOCA.tv/DNVR. Use the promo code DNVR and you get $10 off your first month. That's only $15 per month for the first three months, plus the cost for receiver. You have no contracts, no hidden fees. You can rent the receiver. You can purchase up front. Either way, that'll set you up and give you the Denver sports you love. So check out Evoca TV and sign up at evoca.tv/DNVR and use the code DNVR to get $10 off your first 3 months at Evoca TV.
And despite yesterday being disappointing for the Nuggets, it was lit at the bar. Another packed night at the bar, despite an 8 p.m. start on a Monday night. I mean, talk about just a reason not to go anywhere. 8 p.m. on Monday, the bar was still lit, and there's no better place to watch games, especially playoff games, than at the DNVR bar. Nuggets game this Thursday night, be at the bar because it's the best place to be. And then, of course, with Avs coming around, no better place to watch a game than at the bar. And if you want to come by early to make sure you got a seat, stop by for happy hour from 3 to 6 to get some great deals and drink some Breck brews. And of course, join us on thednvr.com where we have the best coverage of Avs, Nuggets, Rockies, Broncos, Rams, Buffs, everything Colorado sports. We've got the best coverage on thednvr.com. And when you become a member, you can leave your comments on our podcast to be read at the end of the pod, which we're going to do in the third segment. But Mase, right now, we got to go through these and break down just how pressing these needs are to the draft specifically. So let me read the order of needs that we have. Tight end is a 9. Running back and cornerback tied at an 8. Outside linebacker, defensive line, 7.5. Offensive line, we've got it a 7. Inside linebacker, 6. And then low is safety at 3, quarterback at 1, wide receiver at 1. So we don't really need to talk about those last positions, but would you say entering the draft, and especially the way this draft is set up, that tight end is the number one need going into it?
It is, because, and again, it's the one position where you look at the roster and say, all right, I'm not entirely comfortable with what we have. We can get by there. And if they don't draft a tight end early, Zach, I still expect them to sign Kyle Rudolph, who they had in for a workout earlier this month. And that's an interesting thing to kind of look at players that they've worked out, or even someone like Melvin Gordon, who was connected to the Ravens but still remains unsigned. That it's some of this is kind of waiting on the draft, right? With Kyle Rudolph, you'd like to get your all-around tight end in the draft, but if the draft falls a certain way, you can't do that. Then you sign him after the draft, and you kind of move on, and you've got your all-around tight end for the year. But you'd prefer to solve it through the draft, right? You'd prefer to get a longer-term solution rather than a Band-Aid.
Yeah, exactly. You prefer to honestly fix every position through the draft. And Mase, that I'm just from a day one starting need, I do agree with you that it is tight end, because you look at all of these other positions and you could make the argument that the Broncos have starters there. I'm going to make the argument that it's right tackle for me. And the reason for that is with right tackle, and with where the Broncos are picking, if the Broncos are picking in the first round, I wouldn't say right tackle, because then that 9th overall pick, you'd want a starter there instantly. But I'm going to say just picking at 64, assuming they don't trade up or don't make a massive trade up, the Broncos need to fix that position. I'm just sick and tired of talking about Billy Turners, Bobby Massey's of the world, Donald Stevens. I mean, we can go through the list. I'm sick of that. They have to draft a tackle, and they could draft a developmental guy in the 5th round, but then there's no guarantee that he's the guy next year. If they draft one at 64, it's pretty much a guarantee that he is starting next year. And so now let's talk about Mase. Do the Broncos have to draft a tight end? Do they have to draft a tackle? Do they have to draft a running back or a cornerback on day 3 or on day 2, whether it's in the 2nd round or the 3rd round?
Well, with the potential for one-year solutions coming in after the draft, there isn't a position that they have to draft necessarily. They should, if they could get 3 ideal positions on day 2 of the draft, for me it would involve tight end, right tackle, and either edge rusher or corner.
And I agree with that. I do think tight end is there. I do think right tackle is there. And now I'm going to boil it down to just 3, since right now the Broncos only have 3 picks. Man, and this is tough. Oh man, I'm thinking about running back or cornerback here. And you know what? I'm going to go I'm not going to go running back because I think the Broncos can get a solid running back in the 4th, 5th round to just complement Javonte Williams. And touch on wood, but if Javonte Williams gets hurt, Mase, great thing about having Russell Wilson is you can put more on his shoulders in a 3-game stretch when Javonte Williams is out. You don't have to have an evenly split offense or pass and run game with Mike Boone back there. And with what the Broncos are doing at outside linebacker with Baron Browning, we've talked about it. We've talked about how I hate that they're doing that. It doesn't make sense to me, but the depth is good enough there. Oh, man, D-line, Mase. We talked about how the Broncos have 2 solid guys and they need a third. I'm going to go defensive line because that is someone that they could actually get a day 1 starter on day 2 of the draft. So I like the tight end. I like the right tackle, and I'm going D-line as well. However, edge is where I'm caught up with edge is you look at it, and they do have a need there. But they're paying Bradley Chubb, and they have enough committed to him where he's a starter. They're paying Randy Gregory a ton of money to where he is guaranteed to be the starter. And I really like what Jonathan Cooper brings. So for me, it doesn't add up just how the Broncos view their edge position right now.
Yeah, I mean I think this is the one place on the roster edge where I feel like the dice roll may not pay off. I mean, if there's a move that you can question from George Paton over the course of his time, I think it's probably Randy Gregory and getting and targeting him, given his injury history, given his suspension history. You're taking a huge risk here and it's the kind of risk that, frankly, I mean, it might blow up. And if it blows up in your face and then Bradley Chubb continues to be bitten by the injury bug, then you're hurting at pass rusher. The problem is you get to the late 2nd round, early 3rd round. How many of these pass rushers are instant difference makers? I mean, I think this is going to be a position where you just kind of hang on. Frankly, if you've decided Baron Browning can be a good edge, and then based on what you saw in spurts from Jonathan Cooper last year, I'm not sure that I like someone that you get in the 3rd round better than even Jonathan Cooper, who had higher value but dropped because of the heart condition. But certainly he looks more like a 3rd rounder than a 7th rounder.
Yep. 100%. I'm right there with you, Mase. And we know that they don't love Malik Reed because they put just the right of first refusal tender on him. And so to me, it just, where's this 3rd rounder? Where's this 2nd rounder going to fit in? Obviously, they could come in above Jonathan Cooper, but then Jonathan Cooper's got to be one of the best 4th options at outside linebacker in the league. So to me, that's just where it doesn't really make sense. And cornerbacks, it does make sense. Totally the need, especially this is a guy who could instantly be the Broncos' 4th cornerback. Ronald Darby has played 1 full season as a cornerback in the league. He's a guy that you can't count on for a full season. I hope you can. I'm touching wood again. Touched wood too many times in this podcast here, but he's a guy that you just can't count on. You have to count on having a replacement at some point. But then also on the flip side, if you don't want corner to be a need, you can just say, okay, we're going to pay Ronald Darby $10 million in 2023 as well. And you don't have to have that. And one guy that the Broncos could turn to, Mase, if they want to go cornerback, is Rodger McCreary. And let's dive into our player profiles here on previewing who the Broncos could pick at 64. And let's look at cornerback Rodger McCreary out of Auburn. He's 5'11", 195 pounds. His strengths are he's technically sound and matched up against the SEC's best and won. He's physical. He starts with his releases throughout the route and as a tackler. Now his weaknesses, he lacks the ideal size and length to consistently win versus bigger receivers at that 5'11", 190 pounds. And has average closing speed and long speed. Mase, what do you think of Rodger McCreary?
I think of him as the Hunter Renfrow on the defensive side. Yep. And this is why, because he's not long, he's not fast, he's not exceptionally quick. His relative athletic score, RAS, some of you may have seen those RAS charts. Yep. It's 5.48, which puts him behind 77 other corners in this year's draft class.
Whew.
But then you watch the film and you watch him play, and he just makes plays. And that's why it's with Hunter. I kind of get defensive Hunter Renfrow vibes. And even though he played almost exclusively outside at Auburn, I think he actually translates to slot corner at the next level. And I think he could be aces as a slot corner, given time to develop there. Again, the film exceeds the measurables, and I trust the film on him. I like him a lot on day 2.
Yeah, and I like him as a player a lot too, Mace, and I think you're spot on about playing that slot. When you watch his tape, one thing that McCreary does is he's just always on the receiver. He's just a very sticky guy in coverage. He's always on him, and it starts at the line of scrimmage. And one thing that's tough for smaller guys is being able to press at the line of scrimmage and then not get burned, not get out physical. But at 190, he still stays with guys at the line of scrimmage. And one of the things I love about him playing at Auburn is he went up against Alabama and he did very well against him. He went up against Georgia, has done very well against them as well. And we know Alabama is wide receiver U. So the fact that he was able to have so much success against Alabama shows that he's able to play with those big boys, the speed boys, the physically imposing guys, and he can hang with them. He makes receivers uncomfortable. And that's just something that you wouldn't expect from a guy that's 5'11", 190 pounds. And the only thing is, the second round, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense because you do have Kwan Williams there. And like you said, I think he matched up best in the NFL is a slot corner. But man, if he falls in the 3rd round and you can get him with one of your 3rd round picks, I am all for it because he is a guy that you can play on the outside if need be. But man, would he be a perfect guy to help develop behind Kwan Williams and have him be your slot corner for a long time.
I agree. And I think that's, and that's what I like. And I actually think he could step in and play close to immediately if he had to come in. Now he wouldn't have to because you have Kwan Williams, but if something happens to one of those top 3 corners, even though he projects more as a slot, the fact that his experience on the outside means you can use him on the outside, keep K1 in the slot, and kind of like someone like Chris Harris Jr. could bounce between the slot and outside. I could see this happening here as well. This would be an intriguing pick at 75 or 96.
Exactly where I'm at with this as well. I would really like that in somewhere in the 3rd round. And something I think you all will like is stopping by our friends over at Lightshade 3. They have escape artists with high award brand Colorado that prioritizes quality and consistency. They have ratios available in 1-to-1 and high ratio CBD 20-to-1. They've got it all, and it's always using the best materials and ingredients to deliver the premium experience with escape artists. And Lightshade just opened up their 11th convenient Denver Metro and Aurora location. It's the Barnum location, 1 block off 6th and Federal Boulevard. It's their biggest Lightshade store ever, and they have specialty products not offered at other locations. So if you want the biggest selection with specialty items, check out the Barnum store, 1 block off 6th and Federal. And for $4.20 tomorrow, they're giving their 5 best-selling products at buy one, get one for $1 from April 20th to the 26th. Tomorrow is a big day over at Lightshade Dispensary, and if you're looking to celebrate, check them out and use the code DNVR to get 25% off non-sale items, whether you're online or in one of their 11 stores. Hit that code DNVR over at Lightshade Dispensary to get 25% off all non-sale items. Well, Mace, I love that conversation that we had in the first.
Before we move on, you mentioned facing tough receivers, right? On McCreary. According to Pro Football Focus, when Auburn faced Alabama last year, your Crimson Tide, McCreary was targeted 18 times.
Yep.
Only allowed 7 receptions, broke up 4 passes. Passer rating when they threw at him was 56.0 on the NFL passer rating scale.
And when you say when they threw at him, you're talking about the Heisman candidate, potential #1 overall pick next year, Bryce Young. We're talking about
You
Grace,
had to
and he
get that
also
in
had
there,
a
didn't you?
fantastic receiving core. Exactly. Of course, I had to get it in there. It bumps my guys up, but it also bumps Rodger McCreary up. And that was really an eye-opening game for me because, of course, I was watching that game from the other fans' perspective. And Rodger McCreary just kept popping on tape. He's just always around receivers, which is something that you do not see in college ball a lot.
Yep, and the thing is that performance reflects roughly his entire year. The rating when he was targeted last year, 57.8.
Pretty
It
darn
was a
good.
big year for him. He generally got better as he went on at Auburn. He's heading in the right direction, and again, like you said, he's sticky. He can plaster. Nothing about his measurables says he should be able to do that, but he does it, and that's why I get the Hunter Renfrow vibes with him.
Yep, exactly. And Balmer says you're also running a lot of dimes. So who's your other slot cornerback this year? Well, it could be Rodger McCreary stepping in, but if it's not Mase, I really like the idea of Caden Stearns being a dime piece on this defense because he's a guy that can be all over the field, and he was so efficient last year and so good in the few opportunities he got. I want him to see the field this year.
And right now, if you were saying, okay, what's the plan for the Broncos? When they go dime, Caden Stearns is the plan at this moment.
Yep. I completely agree with you. All right, let's hop into the comments section and talk to the people in this third section of our show. And the way you can get your comments read is go to thednvr.com. If you're a member, click on the podcast tab at the top. Click on Broncos podcast. All of our podcasts will pop up. Click on the top one, then scroll to the bottom of the page where our comment section will appear. If you're a member, leave your comments there and we will read them on the next day's podcast. And let's hop into the one that was left on yesterday's show from True Champ Fan 24. He says, let's go back to March 2012. I'm working for a dealership changing oil. It's a slow day, so I am tucked away on a computer refreshing the NFL free agency tracker as fast as I can. No idea I'm about to refresh the page into history. Peyton Manning has signed a 5-year deal with the Denver Broncos. I did backflips throughout the shop, hooting and hollering. My coworkers were confused and mad. Settle down, they tell me. I'm 18, and my favorite football team signed Peyton frickin' Manning. I was not going to settle down. Now to March 2022. I'm working as a manager for an electric supply house. I'm sick, working through a head cold. I'm away from my desk in over an hour, cutting wire and helping customers. I come back to my office and see a text from my best friend. It reads, "Screw you. How dare you take Russ away from me?" I see the next notification. Denver has traded for Russell Wilson. I am 29, no more backflips, but I did do my best heel clicks while jogging throughout our warehouse. What a day. Love, y'all. Love hearing that story.
That's pretty cool. That is pretty cool. But, oh, man. How's your friend feeling now? That's what I want to know, True Champ Fan 24.
It's very true.
Is your friend talking himself or herself or themselves into Drew Lock, or are they just lamenting what was lost?
Yeah, probably trying to talk themselves into Drew Lock and how the Broncos messed him up. And Mase, you know what? It's funny because Peyton happened 10 years ago. Russ happened 10 years, or Russ is happening now. What's the big move? If there was a big quarterback move 10 years from now, what do you think it is?
Wow, because you want somebody who would still have something left in the tank. So it'd be somebody out of the last few drafts.
Yeah.
Maybe Patrick Mahomes.
Ooh, I would like that. How about this one? How about Trevor Lawrence? How about he stays in Jacksonville for 10 years, really tries to do the Jags in Jacksonville right, and he just says, I'm fed up with this. I have to go somewhere else, and then joins the Broncos. You have Jose in the comment section coming in with Joe Burrow. That would be another good one. He says, man, Cincinnati, I didn't really want to come back home in the first place. Everyone kind of knew that. Now I got to get out, finish my career someone else after not being able to get over the hump. And Denver, perfect place. It's where quarterbacks come to finish their careers with Super Bowls.
Another one would be Joe Burrow, and I know his name came up in the comments section. The variable on Cincinnati and Burrow, though, is That's Mike Brown, who is still the is still the managing owner of the Bengals, and actually is still technically their general manager, even though the reality is Duke Tobin is calling the shots on a day-to-day basis when it comes to personnel. Mike Brown, at the chances are pretty good, just because he's 86, 87 years old, that he's going to pass the reins, and the team would go to his daughter, Katie Blackburn, who's been involved with the organization for a while. But what sort of tweaks does Katie Blackburn make organizationally, and does that kind of move the Bengals into a higher tier in terms of how they operate? So on the surface, if it's status quo with the Bengals, I could see maybe Joe Burrow being a little frustrated, but I also wouldn't be surprised to see the Bengals, in terms of what they do operationally, looking a bit different than they do 10 years from now, and Joe Burrow saying, yeah, I'm going to stick it out with my home state team.
Yeah, exactly. Another one that's brought up by Bomber in the comments is Justin Herbert. Man, that may be the juiciest one yet, since it would be within the division. Of course, Russ not even within the conference. Peyton was within the conference, and Justin would be within the division. That would be something.
And the other thing, I think, when we talk about like Burrow and Lawrence, if they're traded, if they don't want to trade, I mean, obviously Deshaun Watson was traded within the conference, but certainly Seattle, if they had to trade Russell Wilson, was much happier trading him outside of the conference. And the only way Aaron Rodgers would have been traded, in all likelihood, would have been outside the conference. And so I think that's something that's going to play into it as well, perhaps. Although, again, Matthew Stafford stayed within the conference, so you never know. I will say this. I do not think that if Justin Herbert left the Chargers within the division, I don't think it'd be a trade. It would have to be free agency. There's no way the Chargers would trade him to Denver. No way.
No, there is no way. And
Yeah.
so this would mean that there would be years of frustration building up with Justin Herbert, where he doesn't accept a contract extension, and then he plays on a lame duck contract, and then the Chargers franchise tag him and he holds out, or he plays and then they franchise tag him again. And that would just be so much drama leading up to this. It would just be glorious for the Broncos if that's how it was all capped off. And also, Mase, if we're talking about this in 10 years, that probably means that there's not this huge gap in between Peyton Manning and Russell Wilson, where you have 6 down years. We're probably talking about Russell Wilson retiring, and either that offseason or the next offseason after is when you have one of these big trades. So, man, that would be exciting. I hope we're talking about that in 10 years.
I hope that what we're talking about in 10 years is if Russell Wilson is retiring, a smooth succession plan to somebody that you drafted, rather than going through all this again.
Okay, but how about this? How about Arch Manning is just getting done with his first contract, and he really doesn't like the team, so he decides to not re-sign with them, and then boom, you're getting Arch Manning. So while he's not someone you drafted, you're getting a guy that's like 26 years old.
Well, let's see. He'd have a 5th-year option, presuming he's a first-round pick, and then you have 2 franchise tags.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Arch Manning is, I believe he'd be
Isn't he the 2026 draft?
2026 draft. So that would be after the 20. That would be heading into 2020 or 2033. Oh my gosh, this is too far out. This is too late.
But Mase, also
here.
Remember, let's say he listens to Uncle Eli, who Uncle Eli said, "Oh, I'm not playing for the Chargers." Nope. What if he does that? He says, "I'm not playing on the 5th-year option. I'm not playing on the franchise tag." And his uncle says, "You know what? You can do this. They will trade you." And that's how it happens.
Well, it's more likely Uncle Eli will tell him, if you don't like the team that's drafting you, just say you're not going to play. It's more likely that Uncle Eli and Uncle Peyton are going to say, try to get in the right team at the start.
Right.
So if you don't like the team with the number 1 overall pick in 2026, make your way to a team that is of more quality. I mean, basically, with Eli, it was, he and Archie didn't want him playing for the Spanish family, and they got him to a Giants team that historically is far more well-run than the Chargers have been on an ownership level, and certainly no regrets.
Yep, no regrets at all. All right, let's hop into the next comment coming in from Mark IT Snatch. He says, "Hey guys, who is the LA/St. Louis/LA Rams biggest Hall of Fame snub?" Well, we got to turn to our expert in Hall of Fame snubs, Andrew Mason.
It's a recent guy who keeps popping on the finalist list, and that is Torrey Holt, who is simply a victim of kind of wide receiver backlog, how it took time for Isaac Bruce. It took time for Andre Reed. It's just it took time for Marvin Harrison. It's taking time for Reggie Wayne. It's taking time for Torrey Holt. He'll get in at some point. The body of work is strong enough, and certainly being a part of one of the all-time offenses, the greatest show on turf, helps his cause as well. But he had some productive seasons even after they were past kind of the greatest show years. So legitimately terrific player. It's just taking him a little bit of time. But until he gets in, and he will get in, but until he gets in, he's a snub.
Yeah, and it's crazy. I feel like he's been a finalist or near a finalist just forever, as long as I can remember. So yeah, you're right on that one, Mason. Before we hit another one, if you're tuning in live, leave us a super chat if you want us to read a comment here. If you're also tuning in live, hit us with a thumbs up. We'd really appreciate it. Subscribe, turn on alerts so you know anytime we're going live. Sometimes due to the Broncos schedule, we have to go live earlier or later than our normal noon time. Just like today, if you had alerts turned on, you would know that. But we really appreciate hitting that subscribe button and hitting us with a thumbs up. All right, next one coming in from Melbourne Broncos says, "My boys, love the jersey discussion on Three Ring Circus. Just throwing an idea out there. Royal blue jersey and pants, orange and white stripes, orange D with the current Bronco incorporated into it, alternate it with the color rush all orange every now and then. The navy blue era has had 5-year curse. Time to let go of it. Cheers and let's ride." Well, the thing that I'm stuck on, Mace, here is the old D with the current Bronco logo in it. What do you think of that?
I'm not a fan. I know some have done like a mock-up that has like a bucking Bronco in the current design, because of course there's that full body Bronco that is an alternate logo that the Broncos have.
Is
I've
that
never
the mean one?
A little bit, the one where you can kind of you get kind of rearing back, and again, it's
Right.
I never thought of it as mean. I just thought it looked kind of weird. I'd just as soon see the old logo replicated, narrow legs and all, rather than trying to kind of modernize it a little bit. Part of the charm, part of the funkiness, I think, is the imperfections involved with it, and I know that was something we all discussed on Friday as well. But I really don't, and I know I'm in the minority on this. I don't want to see all orange. I don't want to see all blue. I'd be content to see just the monochromatic looks die completely. It doesn't look good on a football uniform, but
So you hate color rush jerseys?
I love the jerseys. I hate the pants. If you took those pants, if you had white pants with those jerseys, or a white jersey with those pants, great.
So then, what's your ideal color rush jersey for the Broncos? Is it all white?
All white or all black are the only two kind of monochromatics that work. But the Broncos aren't going to do black. They shouldn't.
They cannot. They cannot do all black.
They better not do black.
No, it's awful.
The problem with the orange head to toe is I've said on Twitter, they look like ambulatory pylons or traffic cones. No,
it's fun for a game, I think.
Yeah.
And Mason, one thing, speaking of all black Broncos stuff, I do not understand the all black Broncos hat that some people wear. It blows me. I'm like, are you a Raiders fan and a Broncos fan? Is this your way of showing allegiance to two teams? It blows me away. So they better never go all black uniform.
What about the draft hat this year? It's black. It's a black.
It is.
It's a black crown.
It's bad. It's terrible. I think they've missed on the draft hats for a long time now, but definitely this year.
This might be the worst draft hat because it's black, and the script makes it look like it says Denver, not Denver.
Yeah. You
should see what the script did to Jacksonville. Oh my! It's like Jack gone.
I don't think it really helped anyone, which is it's just very weird.
Yeah, actually my favorite draft hat, the only one I really liked was the city flag one.
Okay, yeah,
In
yeah.
recent years. That was a good the city, and they did some state flags. They did a really wild Carolina one that had the North Carolina state flag and the South Carolina state flag on it. And the Tampa one was absolutely crazy because the city of Tampa flag is just, it defies description. It is
Is it
weird.
a nightmare?
It's a weird shape. It's kind of like this. For those who are watching, it's a mess.
All right,
Lot
and
going on.
let's get to our last comment here from Mile High Buckeye. Says, my boys, been a while since my last comment, but I've been watching the pod every day, always smashing that like button. Thank you very much, Mile High Buckeye. Need your advice and input here. The financial firm I work for requires a mandated 2-week vacation each year for auditing purposes. Mine starts next week. What should I do? Where should I go? My wife and I are planning to buy a house within the next 8 months or so we are trying to keep it low cost-ish. Side note, I live right next to I-70 in Ohio, and the DNVR bar is a casual 18-hour drive away. JK, we would fly. Also, planning on coming out in August for the Crew Rapids game. Much love as always, and thanks for always getting me through the workday, Alex. And thanks so much for rolling with us, Alex. We really appreciate it.
All right, so low cost. So I mean, low cost makes me think like, okay, what can you drive to from Ohio?
Okay.
And like he says, hey, DNVR bar is 18 hours, so you'd fly for that.
I mean, you got 2 weeks. You can make an 18-hour trip.
Yeah, I mean, go travel. Do a road trip. Kind of maybe drive out and then kind of circumnavigate your way back. Maybe come out to Denver, spend a few days in Colorado, go north on your way back. Maybe go over to like Mount Rushmore or something. Everyone's got to go to Mount Rushmore, right?
I would. I think it's still cherry blossom season out in DC. Maybe for now, but it is, and that's where we're going to see that. But also, I mean, March and April is a great time to get away to a beach. And if there's an affordable beach, man, that's what I would be doing. That's for sure. I mean, this week, the end of this week in Denver, we're looking at 80s. I think it may even hit 80 today. But then I think over the weekend, it's going to be crummy. If you can find a beach where it's just always nice, that'd be hard to pass up.
The one thing, though, is the water. If you want to go in the water, it's not that warm at this point. Like,
That's true.
Like,
I guess you'd have to go down to Florida.
Yeah, and you'd have to go really to South Florida. You'd have to go to like Miami or Fort Lauderdale or something like that. If you went to Clearwater Beach right now, which is west coast of Florida near Tampa, that is 75 degrees is the water temperature. So
pretty nice.
That's pretty nice. I like it a little warm. I like it a little warmer than that. I'm just trying to figure out, like, okay, how far, like, what is the least you could go in terms of getting far south and get some nice water temperature? Jacksonville Beach, it's 72 degrees right now. Let's take a look at up around, you go to like South Carolina. No, it's like 69 at Hilton Head. So that's nice in terms of it being the number 69 being nice, but that's not a nice swimming temperature. So let's see here. Can we find like a Fort Walton Beach? There we go. Fort Walton Beach, 71.3 degrees. So looks like you probably got to get down to Tampa and further south to have something that is swimmable and enjoyable. So Clearwater on the East Coast, and then over on the West Coast, and on the East Coast, about Cocoa Beach, about 76 there right now. So you probably want to get to about Central Florida before you.
Okay, there we go. And you got to let us know what you decide for a vacation. And Mase and I are out now. We're not going on a vacation, though. We're just going to go down to Dove Valley to the UC Health Training Center to talk to some Broncos. We're going to have you covered with all you need to know about what the players say today during their second week of off-season workout program going on by going on thednvr.com and check out some articles that we're going to have there. Also follow Mase on Twitter at Mase Denver. You can follow me at Zac Stevens DNVR. DNVR to get your up-to-date news on what's going on with the Broncos. But we really appreciate you all riding with us today. For Andrew Mason, I'm Zac Stevens. That'll do it today. We'll be back with you tomorrow at noon for another DNVR podcast. Have a great day.